Hi, welcome back to Too Young the podcast. My name is Grace Boulay. Thank y'all so much for being here. And we're just going to jump straight on into today's episode. Today, we're going to be talking about my dating life and the 3 dates I've been on out here in Las Vegas in the almost year and a half I've lived out here. So it's going to be an interesting one. So buckle on in for the ride. Obviously, first I want to say, before we get into anything, if you listened to the first 2 episodes, thank you so much. I very much appreciate you, and you're already my favorite people. If this is the first episode you're watching, welcome. My name is Grace. I think I already said that, but my name is Grace, and this is going to be a long journey for me for this podcast. So, we're still learning how to edit. We're still learning how to talk in front of a camera with a mic, but we're going to get on into it. Today should be fun. Today should be a fun episode, because we're not necessarily just talking about me, we're talking about other people. But because of that, I have a few PSAs that I just want to make sure we're all on the same page about. Number 1, I am going to be talking about 3 different men, okay? These men, I am not saying their names, A, and B, I do not want, and I'm going to say this as clear as I can, I do not want any hate or negativity brought their way, okay? These stories are told by my perspective, by my experiences, and these have nothing to do with any bad hate or negativity towards these men, okay? This is just some funny things that happened, in my opinion. At the time, I didn't think they were as funny, but looking back, they're pretty funny. And look, I learned a lot from going on each one of these dates, and moving forward, I try to remain and stay as positive as I can. So in general, I want this to try to remain as positive as a podcast as I can. So with that being said, I don't want anyone to send any hate or negativity towards these people. If you ever figure out who they are, or if you know who they are, please just leave them alone, okay? Let's bring it back to us, okay? These men are really not in my lives anymore, and 2 of these dates happened almost a year ago. So I'm sure these men probably aren't even thinking about me anymore. And the other one did happen a little bit more recently. Me and him are on good terms, I guess. So I genuinely want no bad blood between these people. I want no hate sent their way. So let's all promise here that this stays between our little circle, okay? And if any of the men are watching, no bad blood. I just thought these were funny stories, and this is my perspective of how things went, okay? Number 2, because I'm talking about my dating life and the fact that I have said I am single, because I am still single, this is not my PSA to the world that I want to date right now, because it's not. I don't want my DMs being like, oh, I heard you talking about dates. Can I be your next date? Please don't. Please don't. Please don't. Please don't. Okay, the next person I decide to date will probably be a while from now. I'm simply focusing on this podcast and my life right now. I don't really want to date right now. I want to just focus on us, focus on my bear, focus on this amazing podcast. And I have other things I gotta focus on in my life right now. Okay, so please, if you are a single man out there and you think that this is the chance to shoot your shot, don't do it. Okay, probably won't get a response. Possibly could get blocked. Just saying. I just have to put that out there in the world. Anyway, we're gonna get into these stories. So the first guy, really, he doesn't have much relevance to anything. The date didn't even last but a few hours, and I wouldn't even consider that the date lasted a few hours. I was just at the venue for a few hours. But he's in here because he was the first guy I dated out here, so we're just going to include him, but it's going to be more of a shorter story. So his nickname is just simply the first guy I dated out here. That's how much relevance he has. I don't really remember much about him. I actually don't even remember. Actually, no, I do remember his name, and it's funny. Me and him barely talked before our date. We matched on Hinge, and yes, I have a Hinge. Okay, I have one, and I have a love-hate relationship with Hinge. Okay, when I first got Hinge a few years ago, when I became single, literally 4 years ago, I downloaded Hinge because everyone was like, oh, it's more if you're like serious about dating, if you're not just wanting to hook up. And I was like, oh, cool. And it genuinely was more of that at first. You still had your guys on there who were just looking to hook up, who weren't looking for anything serious. But there were a lot more guys that were more serious about dating. Now it's just Tinder 2.0. Now it's just a bunch of guys on there wanting to hook up. At least Vegas scene, because The amount of guys that are in from out of town who go on Hinge to try to do like a quick little hookup with like a local, I'm like, y'all are insane. So I'm very picky about who I match with on Hinge and who I decide to meet with. And I've only ever met with 2 of them, and they were both in the stories. So here's the first one. So we ended up matching, learned that he lived here, which was good. And we decided to go meet up at a local bar. And I had never been to this bar, but I'd heard a lot about it. And a lot of people were like, oh, it's a lot of fun. It's good vibes. And so I was like, oh, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. Sounds like the perfect place for a first date. And I had also told Sarah, my roommate at the time, I was like, hey, I'm going here. She's like, oh my gosh, I actually was planning on going there tonight. So it was perfect because I was like, great, Sarah will be there in case I need like an out. And also, if anything goes wrong, she'll be there. And if not, then she gets to make fun of me for this date for however long she wants to. So he ended up wanting to pick me up, which for a first date, I never will have the guy pick me up. And that is simply because if I need to get a quick out, I don't want to have to call an Uber. I don't want to have to tell the bar that I need a ride. I don't want to have to call my friends. I don't want to have to figure out another way to get home. I want to have my car there in case I gotta go, which I'm very glad I did. So we met there and I was already running late. I want to point that out. I was 15 minutes late, which is pretty standard for girl time in Vegas. 15 minutes late is a pretty, that's pretty good. That's pretty good out here. And so I pull up to the front expecting him to be waiting outside. Man wasn't even there. He was still on his way. And I was like, wait, what? So I'm waiting outside for 5 or 10 minutes. And for waiting outside when a man says he's there already or he's about to be there, whatever he said he was a minute. So much to the point where the security guard came and asked if I was waiting on anyone or if I was planning on coming inside yet. Man thought I was just standing out there for funsies. I was like, no, I'm waiting on someone. Don't worry. And I also did get hit on twice in that 5 minute to 10 minute time. That's why I'm pretty sure closer to 10 minutes because it was a minute. It was a minute I was waiting out there. So he finally walks up in his plaid shirt and jeans and we end up going inside. He pays for my cover fee and we go straight to the bar, which I was very happy about. I was like, thank goodness we're getting some alcohol in us because it's already not starting out too well for me. So we go to the bar. He orders 2 shots of tequila and 2 beers, which was perfectly fine by me because it was more of a country bar. It was playing country music. And so it just was encompassing of the vibes. And I actually do like beer. One of my first bars I worked at was a draft house. So I actually like beer, especially when it's a more casual setting. I like a good beer or seltzer moment. I think that it's the perfect vibes. And plus I'm not going to get too drunk on a shot and a beer. So we get our drinks, we take the shot, and then we go find a place to try to sit down. There was no places to sit down, so we ended up just leaning on this counter and getting to talking. Well, I say talking, I should say that loosely because I tried talking and it was more just me running the conversation with myself and him occasionally inputting what questions I asked because man was not that interested in talking to me, it felt like. And I was like, okay, odd, but whatever, So I'm mainly controlling the conversation. I'm not having fun. He's looking like he's not having fun. And so I'm like, maybe it's me, this is my first date. Maybe we just need another shot to loosen each other up, figure out a conversation that we both have in common. Because again, we barely knew each other before going on this date. So there really wasn't anything going into this that I knew to talk about, because there's only so many first date questions that aren't, what's your favorite color? Oh my gosh, the weather's so nice outside. Those are so boring, and I didn't really want to talk about that kind of stuff. I wanted to figure out who he was. So we go to the bar, get another beer, get another shot. He's still not seeming like he's into this. So he suggests that we do the punching bag game, which if you know what that game is, essentially it drops a punching bag that you try to punch as hard as you can, and it gives you a score for how hard you punched it. So he does it. He's super proud about it, and he ends up getting in a conversation with these guys that are next to us, completely ignoring me. Literally starts on this whole conversation with these guys, more of a conversation than he had with me the entire time. Let me also say that. I was like, all right, so he's not into this date. I'm not into this date. We're both feeling the same way. I immediately text Sarah. I'm like, hey, are you here yet? She's like, hey, we're about to pull up. I'm like, dope. So I just have to last another 20, 30 minutes with this guy. Then we're solid. 15 minutes go by. He is still talking with these guys mainly. I eventually get integrated into the conversation because he remembers he's on a date, as he should. Sarah walks up with these group of girls, and these girls are all so nice. They all come up and greet me, and they're all really nice. But this one girl's face is like dropped. And normally when a girl walks up to you when you're with a guy and her face drops, normally it's not for you. Normally it's for the guy you're with, which is never a good sign. So I'm like, fuck. Like, great. What about this guy is not... I mean, I already wasn't planning on seeing him again, but I was like, shit, what am I putting myself into? Is he like that bad? So she kind of pulls me aside and she was like, hey, just so you know, I went on a date with him. I think it was like 2 days before that. And I was like, oh shit, okay. Like, sorry, girl, didn't know. She was like, no, I'm not upset at you. I'm upset at him because he's been trying to see me again. Like, he's been seeming like he's actively pursuing this girl. And me and her, nothing like. She's blonde, I'm brunette. Like, she's like a gorgeous girl. And I'm not saying I'm not gorgeous too, but we're just two very different girls. And his face also dropped when she walked up. He was trying so hard, I could tell, to keep it together. But no, he was like, oh shit. So she asks if I want to go to the bathroom. I'm like, yeah. So I tell them, like, hey, I'm going to go to the bathroom. They say hi. We go to the bathroom. She's pissed that he's on a date with me. Because obviously I tell her, I'm like, I'm not going to like hide this for you. Like, we're on a date together. So we go in the bathroom. She's pissed. She's like, fuck this guy. Like, I never want to see him again. Like, I can't believe he would disrespect both of us like that. And to me, I wasn't that offended by it because this was only our first date. I also wasn't that into him. And also, to me, when you're first dating, like getting out there and dating, a lot of people will date multiple people. I choose not to. I choose to focus on one person at a time, but that's me. That's simply me, and I never will expect anyone else to do that when you first meet. So for him to have gone on a date 2 days before, maybe he didn't like the date, maybe he didn't feel the same way that she did, but then she showed me the text, and as she's showing me the text and telling me about, their date and how she thought it went well, he texts her. And I look at my phone after he texts her, I don't have a text. Only she has a text. And it's to meet him up at the front. And I'm like, oh, so I'm about to go back over to this place. He's not even going to be there. He's not even going to be there to say goodbye. He's like already done. He's checked out. He's off. He's done with the date. He wants to see her. Which, to me, that's the only part I was upset about because I was like, you can't even say goodbye. You can't even say, hey, it was nice meeting you. I don't think we're on the same page. Goodbye. Like, you are literally just running off. Okay. She's even more pissed because she's like, he's on a date with you and he's texting me? Oh, fuck no. We're going. And I was like, we're going? She's like, yeah, you're coming with me. We're going to meet him at the front. I'm like, oh, this is going to be interesting. So we walk our little booties to the front where he's standing there twiddling his thumbs, looking like a scared little cat. And she starts going in on him. It was the funniest thing ever. She was like, I can't believe you would do that to us. Like, I thought we were having a good time, and then now I hear you're on a date with another girl who I'm friends with. And he's like, wait, y'all are friends? And like, I'm playing into this because I'm like, absolutely we're friends. If we weren't friends then, we're friends now because this is the best way to bond with another girl is to be upset over another man. And so she's going in on him, like telling how disrespectful he is and how she never wants to see him again. And I'm like, and if I can just say, we're on a date right now and you text her, that's so disrespectful of me. And the fact that you weren't even going to say goodbye to me, you were just going to meet up with her. Like, you could have just told me, like, hey, I went on a date with her. I really liked her. I kind of want to pursue things a little bit more with her. I'm so sorry, but I'm probably going to go try to be with her. I would have been so chill. I would have been like, yeah, sure, absolutely. Like, she did tell me I went on a date. Totally okay. I hope your night goes well. That would have been the last time I would have talked to him. But I did tell him, I was like, that was really uncool that, like, you were going to end the date like that. Like, obviously, this isn't going well for either one of us. And so I guess I'm going to be the more mature one and end this date for both of us. So we both walk away. He's still texting her, doesn't text me at all. I'm like, whatever. Like, again, was not into this date in the slightest. I had texted Sarah. I was like, let me hang out with y'all the rest of the time. And so we did. It was like me, her, Sarah, and the rest of the girls we were with. We were all having a great time. We got shots together. We got drinks together. We were dancing together. It was a super fun time. This guy's still blowing up her phone the rest of the night. I get one text. It's basically an apology. I was like, look, wish you nothing but the best, but don't really care. Don't really want to hear from you again. Sorry, not sorry. That's the last time I ever heard from him. He was still blowing up her phone, begging, and I mean begging to see her that night. I don't know if she ended up going to see him or what. I ended up leaving and going to my friend's bar to tell him the story. And so yeah, that was the first date I went on out here. And it got cut short because the dude wanted to go pursue one of my other friends, which was fine, first date. You would think if we start from the bottom, it can only go up from here. Nope. Because then we go into the second date. Now, this date happened not too long after the first date. And it was only because I met the guy in the same bar that I went on with the first date, like literally a week or two later. Like we ended up going the same day, just a week or two later, with the same group of girls because I made friends with them all. And we all were like, let's go back to this bar and have a great night. So we went back. We're having a great night. Vibes were good. By the end of the night, me and Sarah were kind of ready to go. We were like, hey, like it's getting late. Like we were not planning on being out late that night. And from across the bar, I spotted Red Flannel Guy, who is our next guy, story number 2 that we're going to talk about. So Red Flannel Guy, his date lasted longer. Congratulations to him. He had a longer date. I ended up spotting him across the bar, and I told Sarah, I was like, oh my gosh, that guy over there is so cute. And she was like, I'm on it. And I was like, whoa, wait, what? No, that's not what I was going at. She was already gone. I was like, fuck. And our other friend, both of the girls were gone. I was left with the guy, and he goes, what's going on? And I was like, you see that guy in the red flannel over there? He was like, yeah. And I was like, they're going to set me up with him. And he was like, you don't seem excited about that. And I was like, it's not that I'm not excited. It's how it's happening. So they go running over. He then looks at me across the bar, and it's like, hey, like, so awkward. And so they drag him over. Not even him willingly coming over. They drag him over. They're like, Grace, meet him. Or like, have you ever seen How I Met Your Mother? It was like, have you met Ted? It was like, have you met Grace? And I was like, really, you two suck. So I'm like, hey, and he was like, your friend said you thought I was cute. And I was like, yeah, I did. Like, I don't even remember what I said. Like, it was so awkward. I was not expecting that. We got to talking. He's like, I think I'm about to leave soon, but I'd love to get your Instagram. Which I was like, at least it wasn't Snapchat. So, okay, fine. So I give him my Instagram. He follows me. I follow him back. We get to DMing, and we actually have more of a conversation than the guy that I went on the first date with. So I was like, okay, Red Flannel Guy, you're giving me a little bit more to work on. He had a boat. I was like, okay, cool. He seemed like he had a decent job. He was a little bit older, which I was like, okay, maybe I'll like that. Maybe I'll like the age difference between. He didn't tell me how old he was. He just said he was a lot older than I was. And I was like, okay, well, I don't know what that means, but we'll fuck it. Let's just experience it. We'll go on a date. So he asked me on a date to Topgolf, which I had no problems going to Topgolf. I thought that could be a fun date. I'd never been on a first date to Topgolf, but I had been to Topgolf on a date. I had been to Topgolf with friends, or at least like something related to Topgolf, because you know how there's like off spins of it. I've been to like those, and I've been to Topgolf too. So I was like, yeah, like let's go to Topgolf. That sounds like a good first date. So he asked to pick me up. I tell him no. I tell him I'll meet him there. We get there around the same time. Or no, he got there first. Yeah, no, he got there first. So he was already inside waiting for me, which I was like, perfect. That's how I like showing up to a first date, is if they're there first. I don't ever want to show up and then, again, be waiting outside and having the security guard be, are you coming in? No, I don't ever want that to happen again. So I go inside. I end up meeting him. He looks exactly like I remember him. I think our bay was already ready. So he was like, let's go to our bay. So we go to the bay. And we get it all set up. We start playing. We had nothing to talk about. And when I mean nothing to talk about, I mean so much to the point where I started asking the first date questions, where it's like, the weather is nice. What's your favorite color? What's your favorite kind of food? Where are you from? Like all those questions that like you roll your eyes at. Like, what are we playing? 20 questions here? Like, I ran out of stuff to talk about because it was just so boring. It was so boring. And I was like, is it me? Am I the problem? Like, this happened on the first date too, but it ended up being that me and the first date guy had nothing in common. So that's why we had nothing to talk about. This guy seemed like over text we had same interests, same, similarities. So why did we have nothing to talk about? I was so confused. I was like, is it me? Am I boring? No, it just ended up being Topgolf. Fun fact, don't go to your first date on Topgolf because your focus, at least for me, I don't know how to do a first date at Topgolf, I guess, because I was so into the golfing, and so was he, that anytime both of us were golfing, or like one of us was golfing, it was so hard to have a conversation because we were both focused on hitting the ball and trying to make sure we didn't look stupid hitting a golf ball. And so neither one of us were that much into the conversation. And so the conversation really didn't start picking up until we both were done golfing, which was after an hour and a half. So we really didn't have anything to talk about for the first hour and a half. We were just kind of sitting there making very awkward small talk, and I felt weird about it. But I was like, maybe it's just the golfing. Maybe when we get sitting down to talking and eating, it'll be better. So we ordered food. We started drinking a little bit more. Conversation started flowing a little bit better. He was like, let's go somewhere else. So he was like, let's go to a bar or to a sports club. So we ended up settling on a place on the Strip. He was like, well, I can drive you there and I can drive you back to your car. And I was like, no, I'll just drive there. Like, it's not a big deal. Like, I'll just drive there too. So we both drive there. I get lost on the way there because I was still less than a year living here. I don't know my way around. So I got a little lost. So I was about like 5 minutes after him getting there. So we ended up walking together to the bar. He waited for me. Good for him. He waited for me. And we ended up walking to the bar together, and we get sitting down, we get to talking, and we order some beers, we order some more food, and conversation is flowing pretty well because it's mainly about sports, which was fine. I was fine talking about sports. And so we were sitting there, conversation flowing, and then I realized I had no idea how old this man was. He just said he was older than me. He was 10 years older than me. In all of my dating years, the oldest I had dated someone like older than me was, I think, like maybe 5 years older than me. And I didn't really necessarily have a problem with the 10-year. I was just shocked. I was not expecting him to say that. And I was like, oh, okay. Like, he was way more established. He's like, yeah, I'm really looking to, settle down. I was looking, I'm looking for a girlfriend. And I was like, perfect. Like, at the time, that's what I was looking for too. I was looking to get in a more serious long-term relationship. So I was like, okay, this might end up working. Like, we figured out we had, we did have stuff in common. We had, good conversation. Well, then I think the second he figured that out, he realized that he wanted to see me again, which was great. But the way that he kind of went about it pushed me back because I was like, whoa. Like, I talked about how I like hosting events. Like, I liked having people over. I liked having, company. I was telling him how I wanted to do like a charcuterie board party with my girlfriends with like wine and cheese and all that kind of stuff. And he was like, oh, you can have it at my house. And, I'll be there too, but it'll be a girls' night. I'll just kind of pop in and, say hi to everyone and then leave. And then, and I was like, in theory, if you were my boyfriend, that would be cool. That would be, such a fun time. But this was the first time meeting the dude. I was like, whoa, like that's a lot at once to propose to a girl. Like, that's like talking about me hosting events in your house when I don't even know where you live. I don't want to know where you live. And it was just kind of a lot to take in and to think about. And I was like, hosting an event for all my friends at your house when, like, that's like boyfriend stuff. Like, I've known you for a while. I know who you are. I know your friends probably too. You probably have met some of my friends. Like, I don't know. It was just kind of a lot of information. And he was then making a lot of other future plans with me. And for someone who thought she wanted a committed relationship like that was very overwhelming. And I was like, whoa. So I immediately went to the bathroom and I called Sarah. I had already called her earlier and I was like, should I go to a second place? And she was like, yeah. So I call her again and I'm like, bro, this is what happened. She's like, damn, that's kind of crazy. And I was like, right? Like, it's not just me. She was like, no, that's a lot. So I go back. The conversation kind of settles back down into a more chill vibe. And we're talking, I think, more about sports and stuff we're both interested in. The date kind of starts settling down. It starts getting later. We're both getting tired. So he pays the bill. We leave. And we're walking back to the car. And this is where the story really takes a turn. Because I was already kind of on the fence of seeing this guy again or not. I was like, maybe I'll see him a second time. See if it's, a little less awkward. Give him a second chance. As I probably needed to. And as we're walking, we were talking about tattoos. And we had already talked about tattoos earlier, but he was like talking about my snake tattoo, which I have a snake on my middle finger on my right hand. And he was asking me about it. And I was like, oh, it's, probably one of my favorite tattoos. I think it's funny having a snake on my middle finger. I was telling him the story about it. And he was like, you want to see my favorite tattoo? And I was like, sure. I'd love to see your favorite tattoo. I'm thinking this tattoo is like on his arm, on his leg, like not where it was. And so the man then starts unbuckling his belt or his pants or something in that region and then pulls it down to see in big, black, bold letters the word untamed. As we're walking back to the car, I'm like, sir, why do you have the word untamed above your dick? I actually don't want to know, actually. I did not ask him. I was just like, wow, that's interesting. When did you get that? I think is exactly what I said. Because in my head, I'm thinking, why do you have the word untamed above your dick? Like, that scares me. I don't want to know what's untamed about it or if that's what you're talking to. I was like taken aback by that. I was like, whoa. I was not expecting him when he asked me if I wanted to see his favorite funny tattoo or whatever he said it was, that he was going to pull his pants down and show me the word untamed. He only pulled his pants down enough to show me it. I didn't even want to see that actually. It was so awkward. And I was like, whoa, never seeing this guy again. I immediately had made up my mind in that exact moment. I will never be seeing this guy again. Or at least I hope I won't. If I ever see him again, I hope I've just run into him somewhere and it's a very quick interaction. Because I was so taken aback by that. And it's funny because we had been talking about seeing each other like that week about like doing like tennis or something. And I immediately knew I was never going to do that. I was never going to see this guy again. And so we make it back to the level that my car was on, and he ended up kissing me goodnight. And I was like, whatever, it's just a kiss. Like, I'll just kiss him and then I'll leave. And so I think he maybe texted me, asking me if I made it home. I think maybe I responded. I don't even remember because after the untamed, everything was a blur. But I never texted him again after that. I was like, nope. And he has texted me since then multiple times, inviting me to events, asking to see me again. And I just haven't responded because every time I think about him, I think about his tattoo and I can't. It's, ugh. So yeah, that was my second date and ended after the first date because I was like, nope, I'm not ever going to find out why you have that word in the place you have it. So now is the time in my podcast where I want everyone to take 5 big sips of water before we get into the third guy. I hope y'all like that segment too. I think it's fun. When I was making the clip and putting the music in, I was like laughing. I was like, hee, this is fun. I will always shout out the girl who I found it from. Name's Remy Cruz. Instagram or YouTube is at Miss Remy Ashton. If you haven't looked her up or followed her, please do. She's one of my favorites. So now we're going to talk about the last guy. His nickname is Panorama. Now, before I get into this last guy, there's less funny stuff about him, but I learned a lot of lessons from the last guy, more than I learned about the other two. So let's get into it. So Panorama, I also met on Hinge, and I met him, well, matched with him, I guess I should say, on Valentine's Day. And now, side note, I don't love Valentine's Day. I never have. I've been broken up with on Valentine's Day. It's never really been my favorite holiday. I mean, hopefully one day that will change, but for the past 8 years, haven't loved it. But it's also my half birthday, so I choose to celebrate my half birthday instead. But anyway, we match on Valentine's Day, and the conversation was really nice. On Hinge, we talked for a little bit, and then he asked me for my number, and then we talked for some more. Which, by the way, it's always a good thing if you can get off of Hinge as quickly as possible. Still have a conversation, still get to know the person, but the last thing you want to do is be having a full conversation and planning everything on a dating app. I don't know, for me, never a good sign. So everything was going great in the beginning. We were talking, everything was good. And then he did one of the best things he did throughout the whole thing, which was he showed a lot of initiative and planning into the first date. Now, what I mean by that is he was on a business trip and he was getting back that day and he knew he wanted to see me. I was free that night. I wasn't planning on doing anything with him, but I was free and I was open to it. And he showed a lot of initiative. He made a plan. Plan didn't work out. He invited me to his place. I never go to another guy's apartment on the first time meeting them. That just I've seen way too many like documentaries and stories about that never going well. And so the third plan was dinner. And that's personally my favorite thing to do on a first date, is because you can really sit down and get to know the other person and get to, figure out if you want to see them again. So he took me to this one restaurant that we both had been to, and I really liked the restaurant. And it was honestly a really good date. We had a lot to talk about. After dinner, we went and got dessert. Even though he didn't like dessert, he still went and got some for me. And then we talked for another hour and a half. Like, we were with each other for a very long time that night. He kissed me goodnight, and it was a really, really good first date. We both decided we wanted to see each other again, and we also both talked about what we kind of were expecting. We were both in a place where we wanted a serious relationship, if we were more doing it for fun. After Red Flannel Guy, I was more in it for trying to figure out what exactly I wanted. Did I want to just kind of date for fun, maybe figure out what I was wanting again, or was I ready for a serious relationship? After Red Flannel Guy, I didn't know. So I was like, this is, the perfect situation where, there is a guy I like, we have similar interests, he seems like a good guy, I can kind of figure it out. And he was in the same place. We both didn't really know what we wanted. So it was perfect. So we decided we wanted to see each other again, and he wanted to see me later that week. So we had made plans for that Friday to go to a club in Vegas. And I had been to that club once. It wasn't my favorite club, but he really liked it, so I agreed. I was like, sure. But the problem was that Friday I was on call. So I was like, I don't know if I'll be able to go. And I was very upfront and honest about that. I didn't, make it seem like I could go, and then something might have came up and I had to back out. Which something did came up, I got called in, which I was not planning to, because that whole month they didn't call anyone in. And of course, the one day I didn't want to work, someone called out and I got called in. So I decided that night that I was going to go into work and I was going to take a half point and leave early and meet him, because that Friday came, I have obviously had to tell him like, hey, I got called in. I'm so sorry, I can't go. He was still planning to go with some of his friends. So I was like, okay, look, if I get out early, I'll go meet you. And that was our plan moving forward. He was very disappointed, but, it's nothing much either one of us could do. Like, that's my job, right? Like, unfortunately, I kind of have to put that first. So I got to work and I kind of made the decision. I was like, you know what? I'm going to take a half point and I'm going to leave early. So I told my managers. I ended up leaving at 12. I went and got changed in my car, and I ran over to the club he was supposed to be at. Turns out he wasn't there. He was at the strip club down the street. Great. So I was like looking for him in this club. I was like, hey, where are you? And he was like, I'm at the strip club down the street. And I was like, well, I'm here. So if you're not coming, I'm going to go home. Like, I just left work. And he was like, oh my gosh, you're there? Like, I didn't know. And I was like, yeah, I was going to surprise you. Like, it was going to be like a thing. And so he came back to the club he was supposed to be at, and we ended up spending the rest of the night together. Fun fact though, his friends that he was with were girls. I was not expecting that. They were all really sweet. It was very much more friendship vibes than it was, he was into them. He could have ended up going home with one of them after, because I didn't go home with him that night. But I don't know, they were really nice to me though, so that's all I cared about. And when he got there and saw me, all of his focus was focused on me. So that was nice. And then Sarah actually did end up meeting him that night. So she made a big deal about it. It was funny. I could tell he wanted to go home with me that night, but I had a rule set already for myself that night, or just in general for him, that I wanted to wait till at least the third date to sleep with him. And so it was only our second date, so did not go home with him. He seemed a little disappointed by that, but too bad, so sad. And then the third date came, and he ended up planning that one at his apartment. Shocker. I wonder why he did that. And so going into this date, I had a doctor's appointment that week that I kind of didn't want to sleep with him that night before. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to see how he reacts if I go over. I'm not going to cancel on the date. I'm still going to go over. But I know he's probably thinking we're going to sleep together. I want to see how he reacts if we don't sleep together. So going into it, I wore probably one of the most like covering and hardest clothes to take off if you were trying to take off my clothes, which was like a full bodysuit, like a one-piece long sleeve bodysuit that you literally have to take off the entire thing. And so it was perfect. It was like genius of me. So we're at his place, and I could tell the man wanted to sleep with me that night. Too bad, so sad for him. We didn't. And he actually reacted really well. I was impressed. He basically he tried. He did try, and I told him no. He asked why, which is valid. You know, we're making out. He goes to start trying to figure out how to remove what I was wearing, and I said no, and you could tell he was definitely, you know, like, wait, what? He asked why. I gave him the answer. He didn't push back on it. He just said okay. We made out for a little bit longer, and we finished watching the movie, and that was it. I went home, and it was a great night. So then when the fourth date came, because each one of these were dates. So when the fourth date came up, I knew that date, not only was I going to probably sleep with him, but I also wanted to pay. That's one thing I've learned in dating is I like doing things for other people. That's like one of my like love languages to other people is I like doing things for them, whether that's little things, big things, paying for dates, getting them gifts. I like doing things for other people, whether it's romantic or friends or anyone. That's just something I've always liked to do. It's how I show that I care. And so I knew I wanted to pay for something on the fourth date. It didn't have to be the whole thing, but I wanted to pay for something. And he really wanted to go see this movie that had just came out. So I bought tickets. Plus, the man also plans things last minute, I learned very quickly, and I don't. So he really wanted to go to this specific movie theater to watch this specific movie. So I bought us tickets for that. The tickets weren't expensive. I think it was $30 for both the tickets together, which is not expensive. The dude, he was like, I'm going to pay you back. And I was like, no, you're not. You're not going to pay me back. He pushed back a little bit, but then he eventually was like, okay, well, I'm going to buy the popcorn then. I was like, sure. Okay, I'll buy the tickets if you buy the popcorn. Whatever. So we ended up going on the fourth date and everything was great. We went to the movies. He paid for the popcorn and drinks we got. And then we went back to his place. I ended up going home after that. I'm not going to say what happened at his place, but okay, maybe I will say we slept together. But I ended up going over to his place. And also, I should mention, after each one of these dates, I went to my friend's bar afterwards to give him a rundown of what happened. I was like, so this is what happened after the date. And he was like, oh, okay. Yeah, it was a really good fourth date. And I was excited to see him for a fifth date. After that fourth date, he got a little distant. And now my timing, I don't remember if it was between the third date and the fourth date or the fourth date and the fifth date. But in between one of the two, I had found out he had updated his entire Hinge profile. Now, I mention this because I should have seen it coming and the end of where you're probably already seeing this going because I should have seen it in the moment. But anyway, I was having a wine night with my friend Julia. We decided between two girls we should drink 3 bottles of wine. So I was a little wine tipsy. She asked to see his Hinge profile. I figured that out. I sent him a very mature text. Granted, I was tipsy, but I looked back on the next day and actually was still mature. And it took me an hour to write while I was tipsy, and Julia very much helped me write it. But I basically was like, hey, I'm with my friend. I'm wine tipsy, but I was showing her your Hinge profile and I saw you update the whole thing. When it comes to how I date, I only date and see one person at a time. Doesn't mean that I expect the other person to do the same. And I'm very clear about that because that's just how I grew up. That's how I date people. That's how I like to get to know people. And with my life, I just personally don't think I could juggle more than one person in getting to know in that kind of way. So for me, that's just how I do things. For him, I never expected him to do it. It caught me off guard. I was shocked because I thought everything was going great. But for me, I just wasn't expecting it. So I texted him. I was like, hey, I saw you did this. I would just rather know now, are you seeing other people or am I the only person you're seeing? Or are you open to dating more people? Like I was just trying to get some more information. We had a really good talk the next day about it where he basically was like, hey, just with how I've seen and done other relationships and been through stuff, I wait 6 months before I fully commit to a person. So in between that time, I choose to potentially date other people and pursue other people while I'm getting to know someone. But I still am very much interested in getting to know you. So I was like, okay, he's being honest about it. You know, I wasn't expecting it, but it's not like he ever lied about it. So I was like, okay, like at least he's, you know, being honest and telling me the truth about it. So I'm going to take it for what it is. And as long as he, you know, continues to tell the truth to me and is honest with me, that's all I care about. So after the 4th date, he got a little distant from me, and I don't really love when that happens. And it's because typically when a man's super interested in you at first and then gets really distant, he's becoming less interested in you. Which of course just so happened to be after we finally had sex. Great. Woo. Love that for me. So I tried to make plans with him again. And I was like, hey, really wanted to see you again. When are you free in the next week? Giving him plenty of time. He always would like to tell me, even since from the beginning, he was very busy. His work was like his first priority. He was always really busy with work. Work always came first in his life right now because that's just kind of the stage of life he's in, which is fine. And so I was like, is there a time in the next week or, so that you're able to see each other? He had told me about a week from then, or he gave me a date. He ended up having to cancel on that date because he had some stuff with work, is what he said. Who knows if that was true or not. And that he rescheduled it for, I think, like 3 or 4 days later. So like, well, at least he rescheduled. At least I'll see him again. I kind of knew in my head that was probably going to be the last time I saw him. With how he was starting to act, I was like, I don't love that. So that wasn't the best. So he had told me when I'm like trying to plan this with him that he was super busy for the next week and that he probably wasn't going to be able to see me much. And I was like, oh, okay, great. Well, in between then, there was a giant event at one of the clubs out here that I got invited to with the nightclub I work at, and I was going with a bunch of my friends at Omnia. So I was at Omnia with all of my friends, and we're having a good time, and I get a text from him. And this man goes to bed at like 9:30, 10 almost every night. So I get a text at like 1:30, maybe it was like 12:30, 1:30. It was like really late for him. And I was like, what is he doing up? There's no way he's at Omnia right now, was like the first thing I thought. So he's texting me, we're going back and forth, and he was like, yeah, my friend dragged me to this event at Omnia. And I was like, no way, you're at Omnia right now? That's so crazy. So am I. So I ended up going to the bar to meet up with him. I asked my manager if I could bring him to the table I was at. She said yes. So I brought him over to the table. Everything was going fine. He was conversing with a bunch of people. I ended up seeing that he had a bunch of Hinge notifications on his phone and that he was checking them, which didn't really sit well for me because I'm like, I invited you to the table I'm at and I haven't really been talking to you much and I'm seeing all these Hinge notifications. Like, it's not a good sign. It's not a good feeling. So I didn't really feel great about it. So I was going to leave because I was like, you know what? Like, I'm just not really into this right now. That kind of made me feel a certain way. I'm just going to go home. So I'm not overthinking this and I can just remove myself from the situation. Well, he wanted to go with me. And long story short, we get back to my car. I hadn't drank much that night, but he didn't know that. And so he didn't feel comfortable with me driving my car back to his place. And I was like, that's fine, you can drive my car. I'm thinking because he said that, I'm going to be spending the night at his place because he doesn't want me driving home. That's not what happened. He drove my car back to his place. He asked me if I was okay to drive a few times. I said yes because I was. And then he left. I then got out around to say goodbye to him and drove off. And it just didn't sit well with me that you didn't feel comfortable with me driving my car to drop you off, but you felt comfortable with me driving away. Like, it just didn't sit right for me. So I went to my friend's bar, told him. He also agreed it wasn't the best move. If he didn't feel comfortable, he should have ordered me an Uber or had me stay at his place. And so it just, like, the whole situation just kind of didn't sit right with me, on top of the fact that I saw the Hinge notifications, on top of the fact that he had been really distant. So he was coming over to my place for our 5th date, and I didn't want to bring it up right when he got there because I hadn't seen him for a while. It had been like almost 2 weeks. So I was like, I'm not going to bring it up at the beginning. I want to just spend time with him, see if things are still normal. If they're not, I'll bring it up, and that'll just be it. So the whole time he was here, everything was great. We were enjoying each other's company. We had a lot of good talks. We watched a movie, and it was a good time. Right before he left, I told him I needed to talk to him about something, and he was like, okay, do you want me, like, is this serious? And I was like, yeah, it's a little serious. It's not going to be long, though. Like, it was really late, so I was like, I don't want to keep you too long. So we sit down, and I talked to him about the Omnia thing. And the reason he gave me made sense, and I took it because, again, he hadn't lied to me up to that point, or I hadn't caught him in a lie up to that point. And so I was like, okay, like, I understand where you're coming from. We both had different ways of handling the situation. I'm glad we talked about it. We moved on. He asked if I had any other questions. I said I did, but I wasn't planning on bringing it up then. He was like, no, let's talk about it now. We're having a good conversation. Let's talk about it now. So I brought up the fact that he would always say he's so busy, but it never really made sense with me with how he would always say he's so busy, but then he's open to dating other people. And I brought up the fact that I did see his Hinge notifications. And, he explained it to me, but he did also tell me almost word for word. I don't remember exact wording, but he did say that I was the only person he was dating and had been on a date with since he went on a date with me, that he was only pursuing me at the time, and that he didn't really have any other intentions of seeing other people because he liked where things were going with me. Again, it wasn't word for word, but that was the conversation, and those were the points he did hit. He did, though, in fact, say he hadn't been on a date with anyone else and he wasn't pursuing anyone at the moment. So I was like, okay, that's really the only thing I wanted to talk to you about. Everything else was good. But I was like, do you have any other questions for me? Because, I'm not going to just assume that he's all good on his side. He's like, actually, I do have a few questions. And I was like, whoa, okay. Like, I'm an open book. So if you got questions, ask me. I'll answer them. And then we get into a really deep conversation about how he's asking me if I want to have kids, what I expect in a family and a husband. We're talking about, what non-negotiables are, what, red flags we have for other people I've dated. Like, we have like a full conversation about, some pretty intense, deep stuff for someone that you have been dating for 2 months. I was like, damn, okay. Like, you obviously see something in me if you're willing to have this conversation with me. So we talk about it, and almost everything lines up except for like about 3 things that we did talk about. And either I felt about the topics we could talk about it further, or we could have a compromise about it. There wasn't really anything that came up that I was like, no. There was like one thing that I was kind of like, I don't love that. But that was one of the things I was like, maybe we could come to a compromise on if we have this conversation, if we get to a point where we're ready to potentially be committed to each other. So that conversation ends. I'm feeling really good with where we're at after that conversation. He texts me the next day. Everything's going well. And then he gets even more distant. And so I'm like, maybe the conversation scared him. Maybe he wasn't really feeling everything. Maybe, I'm trying to figure out what went wrong, because I left that conversation feeling more secure. And from how things were afterwards, I became less and less secure. And I very quickly realized that was probably the last time I was going to see him. And so I tried setting up other plans. He said he would let me know. I kind of realized that was him telling me no, he didn't want to see me again, in a very elusive way. Like, he didn't want to say it, but he kind of knew. And then over time, the responses became later. They became more short. And yeah, I became really much less interested, because I was like, okay, if we're going to have that deep of a conversation, then you're going to be this distant. Like, that just doesn't make sense for me. So I'm out. Like, I'm not going to sit here and beg for any man to give me attention or to try, essentially. So I was like, no, we're not doing this. And so yeah, that happened. We talked a few other times in between then, and I just became less and less interested. Then something happened to me that was a little scary, and I ended up posting about it on my private story just so people in my life would know. And he ended up reaching out about that. He was like, hey, are you okay? I saw your private story. I kind of briefly told him, never got a response. So I was like, cool, you don't even care enough to respond. Like, that was my final straw. When he didn't respond to that text message, I was like, all right, cool, whatever, bye. Then I ended up going to dinner with 2 of my girlfriends, and we all got to talking. I hadn't told them his name up until this point, because I like to keep my personal life pretty private, even to my friends. Like, I'll tell them, I told them his nickname, but I didn't tell them who he was. But that dinner, I decided to tell them who he was, and both of their faces dropped. And remember how I said earlier, when a girl's face drops, it's never a good thing when you're talking about a boy. And one of the girls looks at the other girl. She goes, do you want to tell her, or do you want me to tell her? And I was like, fuck, I'm about to find out some information I probably am not going to like. But I was already past him, so I was like, whatever, go ahead and tell me. This will probably just be the final nail in the coffin that I'll never go back to the guy. It had turned out that one of the girls that I was at dinner with had been on a date with him 2 days after he went on a date with me. And she showed me the text proof. And I was like, damn. And it wasn't the fact that he went on a date with her. It's the fact that he told me to my face that he hadn't been on a date with another girl, and that he hadn't been actively pursuing her, when this girl showed me text messages after text messages of this guy trying to see her again. It was on days where he wasn't texting me. I was waiting for a response from him, and he was texting her instead, when she just wasn't responding to him. She had already moved past him after the date. She'd only went on one date with a guy and was like, yeah, no, not seeing him again. And so I wasn't mad at her at all. I was like, girl, thank you so much for telling me. And so I already knew I wasn't going to see him again, because in my head, I'm like, if you can lie about seeing someone else after it. You could have been like, yeah, I've been on a few other dates. You didn't even have to tell me when. Yeah, I've been on a few other dates since you. That would have been one thing. Hey, yeah, I've been, interested in a few other girls since you. That would be one thing. But he told me to my face he hadn't been on a date and he wasn't pursuing other girls. And with one girl I found, he did. I just didn't know that it was my friend. I was like, damn. So I'm like, if you can do that with one person, how many other people have you done that with? How many other of those Hinge notifications have you been on a date with? How many other Hinge notifications have I not seen? Or Instagram DMs or girls you've met at the clubs? I don't know. I don't care. It's the fact that you lied. I don't do liars. Goodbye. I was like, that was like my final straw. I hadn't heard from him in 2 weeks, and I thought everything was just done and through, and, both of us just decided to go our separate ways without telling each other, even after that long conversation. Well, then the day of Sarah's Daylight event hit, and I got a text message from him that morning. I was shocked. My entire face dropped. My demeanor dropped. I was pissed. I was like, after 2 weeks, you're going to text me on a random fucking day. And his text message was, hey, I sent you 2 gifts. Let me know when you get them. Why are you sending me gifts? So I didn't answer it for a while. I was like, I don't want to answer this in general, but I don't want to answer this right now. Why are you sending things to my apartment? Like, please don't. Please don't send me anything. Don't have anything else to do with me. Well, then I get a little drunk and I decide that I do want to figure out what it is. So I end up calling him. Well, I text him and then I figure out I can't call him, so I'm going to call him. And we get into, not an argument, but kind of an argument. And I'm like, why did you ghost me? And he was like, I didn't ghost you. I've been really sick. And I was like, you could have told me that. And he was upset at me. And I was like, why are you mad at me? And he was like, well, I'm sick. And now like, this is what I'm getting when I come back from being sick. And I'm like, because you didn't tell me. And I have every right to be upset. Like, don't try to spin this on me, buddy. Because all you had to do was say, hey, I'm really sick. Hey, I'm really busy. And that would have fixed everything. But you didn't. Instead, you're trying to put it on me for being upset that I haven't heard from you in 2 weeks, and then all of a sudden you're sending me gifts. No, we're not playing this game. So then he like goes into, I'm sure, the speech that he prepared in his head for me, which was that he wasn't in the right place to date, that he kind of wanted to have some more fun before getting serious with someone again. Blah, 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 blah. I didn't care. I really didn't at that point, because I also had figured out that I did want a committed relationship. I didn't want it with him though. But I was in the place where I was ready for it. Because whenever we first started dating, I didn't know if I was ready for a committed relationship. My walls are still so high after my exes. So I was like, I don't know if I'm ready for that. But after dating him, and when it was going well, did see a potential when he started getting distant and not hearing what I had to say and getting defensive all the time. I was like, no, I'm not going to do it with you. But in general, I was ready for that. So we had a conversation and I was like, look, I don't want to be on bad terms. We can be friends. I think I said I would like to be friends. I was also drunk. Sorry. Didn't necessarily mean like an actual friends, more just like if we ever saw each other, it'd be okay. And so, yeah, I mean, like it was a good conversation. It definitely closed the door, which I always like when I can at least close the door. So it was a good conversation. And, obviously I had it when I was drunk. So I don't remember most of it. I did tell him he was going to be on the podcast. So, hey, Panorama, if you're watching. Told you. But yeah, it was in general, I don't regret dating him because I did learn a lot. I learned, my non-negotiables are non-negotiables for me. There are things that I'm willing to compromise on. They aren't my non-negotiables. And that's what I realize I need to do going forward when it comes to dating, is that I need to know what I'm expecting in a relationship and what I'm expecting in the other person. And for me, that's communication, that's understanding, and that's respect and honesty. I think those are the main 4 for me. And he couldn't communicate. He wasn't honest with me. He didn't respect me. I don't remember what the 4th one was already. I'm like, what was the 4th one I said? But either way, it wouldn't have worked out for me. And that's why, for me, I want to get to know the person I'm dating before I commit to them. Because for me, dating, again, it doesn't mean a full commitment. I could, if I met someone else I wanted to pursue, I could do that. But when I commit to someone, I commit to them. And for me, I want that to be someone obviously I'm romantically interested in, but also a friend. Like, I want the person I marry someday to be my best friend. I want them to be the person that I can go to for anything, who supports each other, who, is with each other through the difficult times, through the hard times, but also there in the amazing moments to celebrate. And I don't know, like that's what I see for my future. And I don't think this man would have done that for me. I think he is so invested in what he is doing that he wants someone who will support his life, which is fine. There are people who are out there who will fit that bill for him. Wasn't going to be me. So that ended. I then decided that I need to kind of focus on myself a little bit more. Because also, like, this was a few months ago. I had been working on the podcast kind of slowly. I realized after all that ended, I should just focus on the podcast. I should focus on making this the best thing I could. And I have other personal things going on in my life that started happening around then too. So I was like, you know what? I think this is a time where I also kind of need to be selfish and focus on myself. And then if I do find that person that I want to date someday, they're not going to come from me looking. They're going to come and surprise me. And, hopefully that will be a person that I can have, at least a long, healthy, committed relationship with. I don't know when I'm going to find my soulmate or person I'm going to marry. I don't know when I'm even going to find the next person I'm going to date. I'm not really looking right now for that. And it's going to happen when it happens. I'm just going to focus on me, I think that that's a very healthy and good thing for me to do right now. So those were my 3 little dating stories. And probably the one thing I want to say after all of this is it's okay to have a goal of being in a committed relationship with someone, but not seeking that out. Because that is a goal of mine. And every time I tell people that, they're like, well, you have so much time left. Like, you'll find that person when you're not looking, like, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I get that. I'm on Hinge still. It's more for attention. And I rarely go on it. I literally re-downloaded it to like show my friends. But yeah, I don't know. I'm living my life right now. And I think you should too. But it's okay to have a goal to be in a committed relationship with someone. It's okay to have a goal to find your person, to find love, to have that ideal to find love someday. I've been in love before and I want that again someday. And I know I'll be in love again someday. And I'm excited for whoever that person is. Does that mean I'm going out and searching for them? Nope. I'll find them someday. And when I do, it will be the right time. I just wanted to say that because I feel like that's like a big thing that I've seen recently, especially being 24. People like to say like, well, you have so much time left. You'll find them eventually. Like, don't worry about it now. And I'm like, cool. Yeah, great. I get that. Like, I'm still young and I have many more years to find a boyfriend, a husband, someone. I get that. And you do too. It doesn't matter what age you are. You can find them at any point in your life. I think that the thing is you need to know what you're looking for and you need to know what you want in that relationship. I know people who married their middle school sweethearts. I know people who married their high school sweethearts. I know people who found the love of their life at 30 years old. I have seen people find their love at every different stage of life. So for me, for someone to be like, you have so much of your life left to live, you'll find them eventually. I'm like, cool, I will, because I know you can find them at any age. I know that age is just a number when it comes to finding the person that you're supposed to spend the rest of your life with. There's not a time limit on me finding that person for me personally. Some people do put that on themselves, which I don't think that's fair. I think you should just give yourself, however much time you need to find yourself and for that person to find you. But I hate when I talk about relationships or finding someone, the first thing they say is, well, how old are you? Oh my gosh, you have so much time left. Please stop saying that to people because people can find their person at any age. It doesn't matter. It's whenever that person is ready. And so for me, I'm ready for a committed relationship. That doesn't mean I'm going out and actively pursuing people. It just means that I know where I am at with myself when it comes to how I want to move about my next committed relationship and what I expect out of that person. That's what it means for me, right? So anyway, long story short, you're not too young to date. You're not too young to figure out what you want. And you're not too young to find love. So I hope you do someday. And thank you guys so much for listening to my random crazy dating stories. I just want to say again, these 3 guys, granted the last guy wasn't the best, but there's no bad blood between any of them. The first two guys, I laugh at those stories. And the third guy, I learned a lot from. So at the end of the day, there's no bad blood between any of them. I wish them nothing but the best. I hope they find who they're looking for someday. And I hope I find who I'm looking for too. And I hope you find who you're looking for. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it for this episode. I can't wait for you to hear the next ones. And remember, I love you and you're not too young. Bye.